Welcome back to What I Wish I Knew at 30, the podcast where we uncover the real lessons behind success, resilience, and human transformation. Today, I'm joined by someone who embodies every one of those words, Rob Theodoridis, the unapologetic powerhouse behind the Rise to Greatness movement alongside his incredible wife, Connie. Rob isn't just another coach with a playbook. He's the man who turned real struggle into real success. From prison cells to boardrooms, Rob's story is one of redemption, resilience, and radical self-belief. He's built multiple seven-figure brands, created a global community of high performers, and authored the inspiring book, Velocity, a title that perfectly sums up the way he lives his life: fast, focused, and full of purpose. In this episode, we dive deep into what it really takes to turn adversity into opportunity, how to find your drive when life knocks you down, and what Rob wishes he'd known at 30 that could change everything for you today. If you're ready to rise, to shift your mindset, and step into your own greatness, this conversation is your blueprint. So let's dive in. Rob, welcome to What I Wish I Knew at 30, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
You did great, Fran. Thanks so much for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We toured together last year with Rise to Greatness, and it was absolutely wonderful to be with yourself, with Connie, who's coming up later, and Bedros Keuilian. What a wonderful, wonderful time. And I know there's an incredible new Rise to Greatness coming out in February, which I hope we're going to talk about at some point today. But today, Rob, we're going to focus on what you wish you knew at 30, because there's been a lot of life lessons, hasn't there, since then? And
Yeah, a ton.
so we're going to start, and I want you just to imagine we're jumping in a time machine right now. You're 30 years old again. Where are you? What are you doing? And what's going through your mind at this stage of life?
At 30 years of age, Fran, believe it or not, I was in a prison cell. So I'd made my biggest mistake at 29, facing the world of startups. I had two businesses at the time, and I was really not focused and hanging out with the wrong people. And as a consequence, which we can talk about a little bit later, is I'd done something that was completely out of character for me. So just when I thought I knew it all, as a matter of fact, in your 30s, you still do not know what you're doing. You know, in your 20s, I believe you're experimenting. In your 30s, I believe that you think you know something. And in your 40s, I truly believe that's where the true wisdom starts. So at 30, even though I thought I was doing great, as a matter of fact, I had no idea what I was doing, and I was completely naive.
So it'd be true to say then that you didn't think you had life figured out at 30. You were still winging it.
I was winging it big time. As you know, look, I started work at 11 years of age in my parents' takeaway shop. We were working there every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, school holidays. We go there and help my parents. And so I always had that entrepreneurial mindset. And that's why I done my apprenticeship. You know, I struggled through my apprenticeship because in high school, I was doing the lowest form of mathematics. I was drawing pictures. And then I went into a trade where it was heavily based on mathematics, the electrical industry. And so I thought I had everything figured out. I was completely going in blind, didn't know anything about business, didn't have a true mentor to lead me in the right direction. You know, my parents, especially my late father, God bless his soul, he taught me as much as what he knew, which was fantastic. But there was still so much more that I could have learnt. And this is why now Connie and I are so passionate about coaching and mentoring people, because sometimes the cost of ignorance can really pay a heavy price when you're going into business and entrepreneurship.
Mm. And at that point then, at 30, you were in business at that point. You'd already started your own business.
Correct. Yes. I had two businesses at the time. So 29, I just started my electrical business, and I was importing products from overseas, from China, and PowerPoint switches. So I had two businesses running. But as I said before, I made a crucial decision in my life that completely changed the trajectory of my life. And you know what? I'm very thankful for that moment because people ask me, would you change anything? I wouldn't change a thing, Fran. You know, those moments when I was stuck in a prison cell, I'd done 18 months behind a maximum security prison, done 3 years parole, and it was out of character for me. But, you know, till this day, like they say, if you do the crime, you got to do the time. But I was completely naive and blind going into business.
So when you went into business and when you were looking at starting that entrepreneurial journey, what
Mm.
was your biggest dream at that time? And now my next question is normally, did life take you where you expected? Now, I'm still gonna throw that out to you because I think there's a huge amount to be spoken about around that.
Yeah. So what was the first question? We'll start with that one.
So the first question was, what was your biggest dream at that time?
Yeah, my biggest dream was just to be successful in business and to do my parents proud and those around me closest to me. I always had that vision of doing something great, you know, and this is why Rise to Greatness is so close to our hearts because we truly
Mhm.
believe that every single person that is born has the potential to do something great in their lives. So my vision was to have a successful business, to thrive. And when you thrive, you're able to help those around you and closest to you, which is magnificent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. So at that point, did life take you where you expected?
What a question. Now, what a question. Look, my life got flipped upside down, right?
Yeah.
So I truly believe that when we're born, each and every one of us, there's a 1 in 400 trillion chance that we are brought on this earth. Now, when you think about those odds, it is extremely high, right? That we're actually even born here. So life in itself is a miracle. And I truly believe that God has a path for all of us. No matter which avenue you take, eventually that path will take you where you're supposed to be, right? But this is why free will is so important because we have the decisions that
Mm.
we make for ourselves that lead us onto that path. And sometimes a lot of people do not listen. They just keep making the same mistakes repetitively, and therefore they never see their true potential. I'm so grateful that I took that path because I would not be in the position I am today. I wouldn't think the way I think today. I wouldn't act the way I think today. And I wouldn't be in this mindset where I know what it takes to be successful in business. Friend, I've lost everything twice. I've started from scratch twice, right? When I was in prison, that was one of the moments where I'd lost everything. And so being able to rebuild yourself from that experience, I truly believe that if you have the mental capacity to do that, then what's stopping you from achieving anything else in your life?
Yeah. There's no limits, is there?
Absolutely. And you know what? Those limits are within all of us. You don't have to go to prison to actually realize I have the potential, right? And this is why we always fear about the what ifs in life. I could come up with a million what ifs of what could go wrong. But this is why we are conditioned so much from children to always think of the negatives. Why don't we rewrite the script and flip it and say, what if it does work out? What if I nail that pitch? What if I nail that talk? What if that business succeeds and I earn K a month? We always think of the negatives, and it's always good to be cautious as such a little bit. But I truly believe that we paralyze ourselves thinking of all the things that can go wrong. And when you do it enough times, you are going to believe that.
Percent. I mean, we're far better. I mean, you coach, I coach, and you know, the one thing when you ask people,
Mm,
what they want in life, they find it extremely difficult to articulate
mm,
because really all they've actually focused on is what they don't want. And part of our mentorships and our coaching is actually flipping that script and actually allowing people or, really creating that awareness in people to allow them to give themselves permission to actually say, well, it's actually okay for me to, for me to want something. So, I mean, that's an interesting thing. We do default to the negative. That's 100% true.
absolutely.
So, looking back now, Rob, to when you were 30, what's something you were completely wrong about?
What was I wrong about? I was wrong about trusting everyone, Pran, and trying to please everyone. That was one thing that I was wrong about. So it's sometimes in life, and this is the way I do things now, is when you have specific goals or dreams, hold those cards close to your chest. When I was 30, I always used to tell everyone about my ambitions, my dreams. And quite frankly, sometimes even the people that are closest to you are not rooting for you. They don't want you to win, right? Because when you start raising the bar, if they have that scarcity or that victim mindset, is they can't see you up there, and so they want to drag you down.
Yeah,
Another thing is, so holding those cards close to your chest is very important to me, but also the trust. When I was 30, I used to trust pretty much everyone, and I used to want to please everyone. Now, I'm not sure about you, but trust for me, it's earned. It's not given
yeah,
freely. And
yeah,
so people have to earn, and vice versa, mind you. If I meet somebody new that I resonate with and we form a relationship, I don't expect that person to open their arms and trust me straight away. Right? Trust is earned.
yeah,
How do you hold yourself? What are your morals? What are your values? Now, I've got a lot of people in my circle that have cut away purely for that reason, because quite frankly, they do things that I don't agree with, and that's not who I am. So therefore, I don't want to associate myself with those type of people. So they're two of the biggest things that I was completely wrong at 30.
yeah, and I think that's a massive life lesson. I'm someone who wears their heart on their sleeve. I'm kind of probably the other way around where my positive connection is my highest value. And I tend to be the other way around. I'll give a lot of leeway until someone breaks my trust. But I think that's something that I've had to learn. Being in
Mm.
business, I've really had to learn that actually you do need to keep your your biggest dreams and the things that you're doing very close. It's become quite a cutthroat world, I think. And
Has yeah,
I do not ever want to be cynical, I really don't, but I definitely have had to become aware of seeing red flags for what they are. I think that's something
so
I've
true.
not been too good at.
But we've all been there, Fran. Don't be too hard on yourself.
Exactly, exactly right. I'm just aware of it now.
Yeah.
So, Rob, they say that life is the best teacher, and sometimes those lessons do come wrapped in disaster.
Mm.
So let's talk about the biggest curveball that life's thrown at you, whether it was in business, relationships, in your personal life. What's one experience that at the time felt like the worst thing ever, but ended up ultimately shaping you?
Yeah, I would have to say definitely when I was incarcerated, Fran. So that was in
Yeah,
2011. So
yeah,
that was the first pivotal moment in my life where things shifted completely for me. So you can imagine now, coming from a good Greek family, there
mm,
was 4 siblings, I was youngest of 4, and doing something, my offenses were drug related. So to go from a hardworking, good Greek family to literally overnight, my life just getting flipped upside down. And
yeah,
so when I was in prison, I was battling with a lot of mental health. So
mm,
it was from the intrusive thoughts, it was the depression, it was from the anxiety, it was the fact that I didn't know how long I was going to spend inside a prison. And, they were telling me I was going to do 5 to 7 years, being my first offense. But this is the beautiful thing about in life. I truly believe that what you do in your life, even from when you're a young person or a young child, it, it stays with you. So I'll
mm,
give you an example is when it was time for me to go to court, they went through my history. They went through primary school reports, high school reports. They were seeing all the awards and accolades that I had won, all the sporting teams
mm,
I was involved in. And they said, something's not right here. This kid is not a kid, 29, but
yeah, yeah,
he's made a mistake. So that for me was the catalyst because I realized when I was at my lowest, and I remember the pivotal moment was the 31st of December 2011. I was stuck in a 3 by 2 cell on my own, thin mattress, no TV, no books, nothing more than a stainless steel toilet next to me. And I remember I was I was so disgusted in myself, and I was
mm,
banging my head against the 3 foot wide concrete wall, and I was just really, really gutted and the intrusive thoughts were going wild. They were trying to feed me with all these tablets, antidepressants and whatnot, and I have nothing against anyone taking that stuff. But I made a promise to myself, Fran, that if my mind can get me into this state, to feel this way, to be that low, to be that depressed, then I knew, like every polar opposite, that my mind has the capacity and the ability to get me out of that state. How do we do
Right.
that? It's like a muscle. Every single day that passes by, we just have to chip away. Just do the 1%,
Mm.
right? Routine. Go to work. Don't let those thoughts go wild. Be in a routine. Train. Interact with people. Read a book. Whatever we can do to get our mind off that. And that's what helped me through it, along with my faith in God, along with my family. But for me, that was a catalyst that changed my life and my trajectory. The second one is going through COVID. You know, I came out of prison, believe it or not, with Connie, managed to build a 7-figure business by mistake, not even knowing what I was doing, right? And so, you know, at our peak, we had 12 to 14 full-time employees, you know, doing 7 figures, and then COVID came. What I
And this was your electrical business?
Yeah, electrical business,
Yeah, yeah.
and that pretty much wiped us out too. That was the second time, and you can imagine now spending years working on a business that eventually was thriving. And then COVID comes along, and then all our major projects get shut down. And
Mm,
we had to pay over 300 grand in wages over that period where we weren't working to hold our staff on.
mm.
Now, I can tell you this, if it wasn't for the period where I was locked up, to reframe my mind, to build that mental resiliency and increase that mental thermostat, COVID really would have wiped me out and I wouldn't have been in a good way. But this is where I love individuals who take the leap, and when they get knocked down, they have the ability to get back up. Every time you rise, Fran, you are building a muscle that nobody can take away from you. So they're the two most critical moments that changed my life.
And when you look back to that period of time, when you were in prison, um, you have people around you that were there to support you, or was this something that you knew you'd messed up, and from there, then it was something that you were creating those habits and rituals with, from inside to actually get through and really be able to, sort of meet the challenge that you had? Because you said actually at the beginning, you can imagine, Rob, I can't. I honestly
Mm,
cannot imagine how that must have felt when you'd come through from being, as you said, a good Greek family, always being awarded at school and everything else, to have, got involved with the wrong crowd,
mm.
to have done what you, and that's not taking away from, consequences and everything, of course. But as you said, first offense, 5 to 7 years in prison. I mean, what was the hardest part about that experience?
The hardest part, look, prison's a different world inside there. And when you see the old criminal shows and all those images of the old prisons, so I spent most of my time in Long Bay. That's where I initially went, in Long Bay Prison, and then I spent almost a year in Goulburn. Now, the Goulburn is one of the oldest prisons in the country, and it was known as the killing fields throughout the 70s and 80s. So it was a very, very harsh prison, right?
Mm,
So for me, it's the hardest thing was coming to terms with what had happened,
mm.
because I was so naive, thinking, "Oh, I'll just get a slap on the wrist or a fine, and they'll let me out." This is how literally I was thinking, right? But
Wow, so you didn't even know when you went into that actually you were going to prison?
no, I had no idea. I got locked up from day one. So basically, I mean, I knew wholeheartedly what we were doing was wrong, hands down.
Yeah,
But to the
yeah.
extent that how serious the offences were, I did not know a clue. Did not know a clue about the justice system, how it all worked. And so I was thrown in the deep end from day one. And it's funny because when I arrived at Goulburn, and this is a funny story, is coming from the bus from Long Bay Prison to Goulburn. When we arrived at Goulburn, they put me in a cell, and the gentleman that I was put in a cell with, I knew he was a murderer, right? So, and funny enough, he actually had been on Australia's Most Wanted, and I had no idea. And so,
I'm tingling. I can't even, yeah. It's
Yeah,
a different world.
it's a true story, and he has a remarkable story, even though he did what he did, but, it was mind blowing. The long story short, I was always sleeping with one eye open, and it was you do some funny stuff when you get thrown in an environment like that, and showering with your back against the wall because you want your eyes to be peeled on everyone.
Yeah.
So you learn different skills. You learn to become street smart. You learn to read people in a good way. Your senses are heightened. And I was in remand for a long time waiting to be sentenced. But one of the things, Fran, I was so grateful for was every day, even though I was feeling the way I was, I would
Mm,
I would ask the guards, we called them screws, inside a
mm,
prison. I
mm,
would ask the guards, "Sir, is there any work available? Can I come and work?" And eventually they would tell me, "Theodoridis, piss off. Stop asking us that same question," right? And until eventually one day they gave in and they said, "All right, be ready at 4:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. We'll kick your milk in. We'll give you 10 minutes to get ready and you're coming with us." And that really changed my life. Why?
yeah,
Because he gave me a little bit of purpose. He gave me
yeah,
routine. He gave me structure.
yeah.
And that discipline, I've never taken that away from myself. So every time when people get flustered or they don't feel like they're going a little bit off track, just look at what your routine is like. Are you disciplined? Are you spending that half an hour scrolling through your phone, or you could be creating some content or reading a book?
Mm.
We all have a choice. The question is, what are we doing with our time?
Absolutely, 100%. That's, that morning routine, and really, we're coming back full circle, but, I mean, when I was brought up, our morning routine, like, my mother was ruthless in
Mm,
a good way,
yeah,
but it created the discipline in, um, myself and my siblings, my sisters, because I had horses and dogs and chickens and everything else, but they came first. You had your morning routine. If you signed up for something, whether it was swimming, gymnastics, whatever it was, you kept doing it. That was just there were no back doors. And she always used to say, there's no such word, well, she still does. There's no such word as can't was killed by won't. And I love that saying because it is about that discipline. It's about purpose. It's about really being able to get through whatever the challenges are that you have in life. There's always an answer. And I love that. I
amen.
mean, clearly, I mean, you push through through that discipline, through that routine and through annoying those screws to
Mm,
actually say, take me to work.
yeah,
Rob,
so true.
if you could go back now and whisper advice to yourself, during that time, what would you say?
What I would say, Fran, if I could whisper to my 30-year-old self is your opinion of yourself should always outweigh what anybody thinks of you. Because we live in a world where, you know, everyone everyone has an opinion, right?
Yeah,
So the thing is, what are we going to do with those opinions where we've got so much noise in our lives? I struggled with confidence when I was younger. And so the confidence part came from wanting to please everybody else
yeah.
and worrying about what others used to say about me. I was an introvert and still am, believe it or not. I'm an introvert. And so for me to be outspoken or to do something that's, out of character is not my style. But I've learned,
Mm,
friend, if I could whisper something for myself going back in time, it was your opinion of yourself should far outweigh what anybody thinks of you. And so if
yeah.
you're stuck and you're feeling, I don't want to do that post, or I'm too scared to speak on stage because I might get ridiculed by who do you think you are? You'll amount to nothing. And I cop that. I cop that when I wrote my
Mm,
book. It's like,
mm,
you know, an author now and you'll never amount to nothing. It's not about me. It was never about me to begin with. And I always say that whatever I've achieved in my life, Fran, and Connie will back this up, is it is not from my own doing. God has given me the authority to come here first and to do the things that we do. When people pound their chest and say, I'm a self made millionaire, are you really? Are you really a
yeah.
self made?
If you
You've
do it all on your own.
absolutely. There's always people around you. And quite frankly, like I said, the higher power, if it wasn't for God giving you authority, you wouldn't even be here to start with.
True enough. It's true enough. So through all those challenges, I mean, everything that you went through or that you created, how have those challenges changed the way that you approach success today?
So I have this innate ability to be able to pivot when things go wrong or something difficult comes along. People used to
Mm,
always look at me a little bit strange when a difficult situation would arise and they would ask me, "Why aren't you flustered? Why isn't it bothering you? I don't understand that behavior." And it's not because I didn't care, but it's because of that mental clarity and the resilience that I've built over the years. And so that would be the biggest thing that I've, you know, on my sort of weaponry or artillery, that is what I have is one of my biggest strengths, being able to pivot or make decisions when something is not going correctly.
yeah, and that's a really, really well, it's really sage advice, being able to be aware of where you're at and what's going right, what's not going right, and then to be able to adapt and pivot. And, obviously COVID was a huge
Mm,
kind of curveball from that perspective. And, look at what you and Connie have adapted into now and what you're doing and the energy and the passion that you bring to that is amazing. So,
thanks,
Rob,
Fran.
if we get into the heart of this episode, if you could give your 30-year-old self, or maybe your 29-year-old self for you, just three pieces of advice, what would they be?
3 pieces of advice, Fran, my 30-year-old self. You know what? It would be do more that's required and don't do the bare minimum. So always strive to do more than what you're required to do. That is with anything in life because people will remember that. The second one would be, and this was taught by my father and my mother, and I'm so thankful for this, is always treat people well because people will always remember how you make them feel. I will share something extremely powerful with you, friend. Why that's so important is when we used to work in the takeaway shops, my parents introduced something where they had a lollipop, and every time a child will come in with their families, especially on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night, it was our busiest period. And so they would give a child a lollipop when they would get their food and their order. You might not think that's a big deal, but fast forward 20 years later, I was walking in a busy shopping center and a girl approached me and she goes, "Weren't you one of the brothers that used to work in the takeaway shop all those years ago?" And I said, "Yes, I was. I was the youngest of four, the youngest of my brothers." And she smiled at me, Fran, and she goes, "I will never forget how your parents used to make me feel when they used to give me a lollipop." So
That's beautiful.
the moral of the story is it doesn't matter if it's a 5-cent lollipop, it's the gesture. And that girl remembered that sentiment and that feeling of love all those years back. And so it's extremely important. And my third one would be to ask yourself how you want to be remembered in this life.
Yeah, I love that. And what's the question that you ask yourself for that?
The last question,
Yeah,
how do I want to be remembered?
yeah.
I'm glad you asked that question. I want to be remembered, Fran, as a man of strength, high values, high morals, and I want to be the person that impacts lives to the point where they tell me that Rob Theo was the person that said those words that made me start that business, that made me
Mm,
get on that stage to do that talk, that made me start that podcast show. I want to be remembered like that. So the impact that we have on people, it's not about me. It's not about the money. The money is great because we get to help those around us and we get to do wonderful things. But truly, when you look at the past leaders that have gone through our lifetime and throughout the
mm,
centuries, they came here to serve others. It wasn't about
yeah,
them. And this is why they've left such an impact. And that's how I want to be remembered is how I go back to others and help them elevate to be the best versions of themselves.
I love that. And that's so powerful, Rob. And it's so, so important. And when you look at obviously the young lives that both you and Connie have impacted, and the amazing work that you do with those youngsters that came out to rise of greatness, and just incredible to see that. I mean, you embrace exactly your own philosophy, and you can see that in the love that you see with these youngsters that are just killing it. You know, they're out there, they're doing things which most youngsters at their age wouldn't be doing. So I really love that. You know, just bringing that back, I mean, do you think that young professionals and entrepreneurs today struggle with the same things that we did, or do you think they're facing a completely different world?
I believe there's certain facets that are very similar to what we used to experience, Fran, but the difference between back then and now is I truly believe the world is moving at a very fast pace. And I also believe that there is a lot more distractions that the younger people are facing with. And this is why it's so important. We talk about balance and balance here and balance that. It is so important to understand that sometimes we completely have to disconnect because these young people I'm noticing now, and we mentor and coach a lot of the youth, they're our next leaders.
Yeah.
When they
Mm.
immerse themselves in a screen for, 80% of the day, and they're relying on that screen for a dopamine hit all the time, right? This becomes dangerous because they lose that facet and that ability to have the critical thinking skills to make decisions. They lose those skills to have a decent conversation or to diffuse a situation where you might get a little bit heated.
Mm.
So I truly believe these are the problems that we're facing now. Communication is a big part. I'm finding a lot of young people can't even communicate, look you in the eye and have a conversation. I see people crossing the street with their head in their phone when cars are passing by. And so I truly believe that the biggest issue now is being able to disconnect and work on it. We all have human capacity and the ability to do great things. We've all got those mental and those skills that the divine has given us. But because we're
Mm.
so immersed in everything, friend, we're losing that connection and the ability to actually tap into those beautiful things that God has given us.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. And I know part of the reason for starting this podcast was really to actually really start creating those relationships again, those positive connections that actually allow people. And I know we're connected,
Mm,
um, and we're using the internet and everything else, but we're actually having a conversation. And to be able to do that, you're 100% right.
mm,
There are so many kids that cannot look you in the eye, that cannot actually hold a conversation. You've met my boys,
mm,
those I really instilled in them, and my girls, that being able to speak to people. When they were little, we used to take them around to all the grandparents, all the aunties and uncles, and they've got great grandparents and everything else. So, we were always on this trail of all these people, to the point where they'd look at me and they go, "Do we have to hug these?" It was a real thing, but um, they learnt the power of relationships and the importance of it, because when we lose human connection, where do we go then? Where do we
absolutely.
go?
Absolutely.
And, and I think that's part of this podcast, is really about really instilling and ensuring that we maintain that human connection. Of course, I much prefer to meet people face to face, and we'll be doing that in February, no doubt.
Yeah.
But it's, to actually be able to continue this and to speak and talk, I think is just amazing.
So
So,
true.
Rob, just going back, I mean, what's one mindset shift that really completely changed your approach to success?
The mindset shift for me, Fran, is that changed my life, and I'm so glad that I have it, is the ability to being able to stand the barrage of difficult moments that life may throw at you, is not to shy away from doing the hard stuff or the difficult reps. People want, we're living in a fast paced world, and I find that people want everything on a silver platter. Well, we have to understand that the brain is this amazing organ. A lot of people
Mm.
do all the work from the neck down to train, look fit, feel good, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. The truth of the matter is, how many people are actually doing the work from the neck up and training the mind on a daily basis? Because that's where it all starts, your
Yep.
brain and your heart, right? And so for me, it's having the ability to be able to go through multiple difficult moments at the same time, but also have the ability to be optimistic as well. When a difficult moment happens for some people that I know within my circle, they crumble very easily, or
Yeah.
they get put off track, and it finds them so long to get back on track, and they lose all that momentum. That's why I called the book Velocity, because when you think about it, is you've got this big boulder coming down a hill compared to a small boulder. The big boulder, more weight, more velocity, more strength, more speed. And this is why I tell people, when you have momentum, yes, there will be moments where you get derailed in life. Things don't go your way. You might lose a deal. You might lose money. You might lose a relationship, whatever it might be. But the problem is, reflect, understand what's happened, feel
Yeah.
the pain if it was any pain, feel the emotion, and then get back up as soon as you can.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that people maybe aren't aware of is that they have a choice as to how long they sit
Mm,
in that negative space of where they are. And they also have a choice of how long they kind of, you know, muddle about there. Because if you have a purpose and you're in that space where you know what you need to do, of course it's fine. You're going to get knocked down. But, the measure of the man or the measure of the woman is really about how you bounce back and how you get back on
yeah,
track.
absolutely.
And, you've certainly shown that throughout your life, Rob, as to how to get back on track. Yeah. And keep that momentum going.
Thanks so
It's a
much.
choice.
It is a choice, friend. We all have a choice. I would also say, now that you mentioned that, is if we look at some of the greats, some of the biggest entrepreneurs in the world right now, the likes of Elon Musk, the late Steve Jobs. What about Amazon, Jeff Bezos, right?
Mm,
When you sit and think about, all of us have the same amount of time. So when people tell me I don't have enough time, or I can't do this, I can't do that, it is a choice. It is a choice, and what we do with that time is completely up to you. I know that those guys who are most successful really, really protect their time at all costs. And we all should do that, as a matter of fact.
100%. And I was just about to say, I was listening to something this morning, a podcast at 4 o'clock this morning. And one of the things that came up with that is, when you look now at AI and how we can use that to really prioritize, but that wasn't actually where I was going with that. I was when we back to your point right at the beginning about, that always saying yes to people, that people pleasing mode. But actually, when we become intentional and when we work on that, that we actually know where we're going, we have our own purpose, we have our own map of what we want to do. It makes it so much easier to start saying no.
So
And
true.
that's what I was thinking about that.
So
And it
true.
and it is, because it keeps us on track then, and we're not in that place where we say yes to everybody, because that's where our time's taken up.
Yeah, so true, Fran. We've got this method that we teach in our coaching. It's called the FOTOS method. So it's FOTOS. Photos means in Greek light. And
Okay.
I'll give you an example. Do you remember when you were a kid and you used to hold a magnifying glass, and when you find that sweet spot, that beam of light will be so strong it'll burn that leaf,
Yeah.
right? This is where this method is so important, because all of us can get distracted. Now,
Yeah.
if we sit and think, what are the most critical things that, what's our end destination we want to get to? What's our goal, right? If we have a couple of things that we want to achieve in this specific week, then we really hone in on the FOTOS method and
Right.
say, okay, these are the three core things. I'm going to focus my light and energy on those things and nothing else. Because we could have the 2 hours of scrolling on social media. We could have the Netflix movie binge. I'm not saying
Yeah.
you can't enjoy yourself, but if there's
Yeah. Yeah.
tasks at hand to move the needle where you want to get to, you have to
Yeah.
prioritize that.
You do. And that's all part of the planning process, isn't it? To be laser focused and be able to do that. So that's amazing. Going back to your kind of 30-year-old self, or even now, really, any time in life now, what's the best advice you've ever received and who gave it to you?
Hmm. Oh, what a great question. The best advice was an old mentor of mine, and I'll never forget it, Fran. He goes, "Son, come over here." And I went over and I was talking to him about my business and how excited I was. And he goes, "You're in business, are you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Have you ever conducted the bus test before?" And I looked at him and I said, "The bus test?" And he goes, "Yes, yes, son." He goes, "If you were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, could your business run on its own?" And I was like, "No, it couldn't." And he said, "Well, you don't have a business then, son. Work on it." So that's
I love
why,
that.
yeah, I'll never forget that.
Absolutely. I like that. The bus test. I remember that one.
Mm.
I love it. Rob, we've been through some of the deep stuff. Is there anything else before we go on to our I've got a little section now, which is a bit of fun. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience before we move on? I know you've had, you know,
Look, the biggest thing for me that I want to share with people is if you're going through a season or seasons where you're feeling that there is so much more for you to do in life, and you feel that you've been brought here to do more, and you've just got that feeling where, and you don't know what to do. I tell people that through reflection and introspection, that's where you find the true direction. And so this is where it's important that we always have the answers within Fran, but because we're so focused on going to work, finishing work, pay our mortgage, pay our bills, and just doing that alone, we live a life. And I've seen this with my late father, God rest his soul. He taught me so much. But one of the biggest things that stuck with me was he had so many regrets, so much unfinished business, and he passed away at 81. And I promised myself to the day I die and take my last breath that I will do everything in my power not to be in that position.
yeah, brilliant. And I know you will.
Thank you.
So, Rob, we've covered the deep stuff, and now let's have a bit of fun. I'm going to hit you with some real quick fire questions. Don't overthink this. Just give me what comes to mind.
Awesome.
Okay, so are we ready?
Let's go.
What was the worst business or life advice you ever got?
Pay your GST every quarter. And the reason for that is a lot of businesses, as a matter of fact, as of September, Fran, over $50 billion worth of unpaid tax is from small businesses in Australia. And I've been on the receiving end of being on the wrong side of that. So
Hmm.
if I could give some advice to small businesses, even medium businesses, don't pay your GST every quarter on your taxes. Pay it every week. Stay on top of it
Right.
and get them
Okay.
off your
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. Yeah. Good one. I love that.
Mm.
If you could have lunch with any historical figure, who would it be?
That's an easy one for me, and I'm going to say my Lord Jesus Christ is one man that roamed the earth. And whether you're religious or not, this is not about pushing agendas, but for me, it's the longest serving faith religion that exists with the most amount of proof. And so I would love to spend time with Christ. I could learn so much from him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What's a guilty pleasure you refuse to apologize for?
It's actually one of the things that we spoke about, and that's saying no more often. Yeah, look, I've learned to and this is not a bad thing, right? Because it'd be going against what we believe in is it's not being heartless, but using your heart less. And so
Okay.
that
Nice.
is not being cruel to anyone. That is
Mm.
not being mean or holding any animosity or anger towards anyone because that does more harm to you than it does to them. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
saying no, I guard my time like there's no tomorrow. And yeah, for me, it's saying no, and I don't feel guilty about it whatsoever.
Brilliant. Brilliant. That's the only way to stay on target, isn't it? So, Rob, if your 30-year-old self had a theme song, what would it be?
Fran, it's a song that not many people would know about, and I would say the song is called "Stranger in Moscow" from Michael Jackson. Now, for those who don't know the story behind it and the why it resonates is because when MJ was touring in the early 90s, he was going through legal battles, as you probably would have known, and he was in
Mm.
Moscow, world famous. There was thousands and thousands of people sitting outside his hotel room. Even though he had all these fans, he was locked in his room and he felt like a stranger because he couldn't go out there and share it with the world. He was going
Yeah,
through all the legal troubles. And so he wrote that song in his deepest and darkest moment, Stranger in Moscow. Why it resonates with me is because I felt the same way when I was locked up. I felt that I was a stranger. People had turned their backs on me, even when I was in and when I got out of prison. And yeah, that song's dear to my heart.
I love that. I love that. And the last question, Rob, what's one thing you absolutely sucked at in your 30s, but you've mastered now?
The
Probably gonna be
ability
the same.
the ability to pivot very quickly and,
Yeah.
you know, not caring about what others think. I'm at that stage now, friend. I'm not gonna swear on the show, but it's an F word.
I
When
don't
you get
mind, you can.
it's when you get to your 40s, you do not care what anybody thinks anymore. And that's the way I am. I started that a lot earlier. And so for me, it's the ability to pivot quickly and not care about opinions anymore. Just focus on my lane and my race.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, you can't change how anyone else feels or how anyone else perceives what you're doing. You have absolutely no control over their emotions or their reactions. The only ones we can actually control are ourselves. So I think, that's one piece of really important advice to everybody that, out there that's listening that thinks that everyone is really concerned about what they're doing or what they're not. They're not. People don't
So
care.
true. So true, Fran.
People just don't care. And in, 1 year, 2 years, all the things that you haven't done because you think that people are going to judge you on,
Mm,
you're the only one judging.
that's so
That's
true.
just the way it.
You know what, Fran? That's beautifully said. And you just have to think about, and this is probably maybe a little bit of a morbid thing to say, but it's true. When it comes time for us to leave this realm, and when you picture yourself, you know, in your casket, at your wake, the people who you're too worried about doing stuff and they're saying something about you, they're probably not going to even come to your funeral to lay
No.
flowers on your casket. So if that's the case, what would you care? Why would you care about what they say about you now?
Who cares about their opinion?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet opinions of other people stop people doing so much, that fear. So, yeah, if one piece of advice that anyone takes away today. Wow, Rob, that was incredible. I know so many of our listeners are going to really resonate with your story.
Thanks, Fran.
Before we wrap up, though, let's just do a quick recap. What's the single biggest takeaway that you want people to remember from our conversation?
Dream big, have faith in yourself, and don't care about other people's opinions.
I think we covered that
Absolutely.
quite deeply. I hope anyone listening to us on YouTube or Spotify or Apple has got that it really, other people's opinions of us are not relevant.
So
And
true.
unless you're doing something you know, which you shouldn't be, then okay, maybe that keeps you in check. But in anything that you're dreaming, yeah, you've just got to be able to go out there and do it and be who you are, do it from the heart.
You have to, Fran. And one last thing that I will say is life isn't a rehearsal. We're not going to get a second shot at this. So give it your all. I much prefer to fail out of the 1,000 times that I try, 999 times, but knowing that I gave it my all and I have no regrets in my life.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's exactly your philosophy of how you live life, Rob.
We sure do. Very proud of it too.
And so you should be. And
Thank
I
you,
love
Fran.
that. And for everyone listening, here's my challenge to you. Take one thing from today's episode and apply it to your life this week. Maybe it's reaching out to someone who can mentor you. Maybe it's finally taking that leap that you've been scared of. Whatever it is, take action. If this episode inspired you, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have a question or a topic, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for tuning in to What I Wish I Knew at 30. And remember, your best chapters are still ahead. Rob, is there anything you'd like to add before we leave?
Just want to thank you for the opportunity, Fran, and to all the listeners, subscribe to this amazing channel. And just want to say thank you so much for your time. God bless.
Thank you too, Rob. I know you're really, really busy, and I really appreciate it. Can't wait to see you guys again very, very soon. And thank you so much for joining me on What I Wish I Knew at 30.
Pleasure, Fran. Thank you. Cheers.